We are going to continue our conversation on chapter 10. Just a few quick reminders. Please make sure you've checked week 1 for your career plan step 1. If I asked you to revise that assignment, please make sure that you do that before Sunday. Also, thanks guys, if you did not schedule your resume review or your mock interview until later, you still need to go back into week 1 and put in those times, because that is for a grade. So I'll open that assignment back up for those of us that did not finish that, so you can get that done. I don't want you to just go to the mock interview or do your resume and forget to go back and put those times in, because just because you do the mock interview and get your resume reviewed, if you didn't put the times in that assignment, you're not going to get a grade for that assignment. So make sure you go back and do that. All right, Tyler, funny story. Tyler, I don't know if you noticed. Tyler, can you hear me? I don't know if you noticed that there was another Tyler in here, but there's a Tyler Bean and there's a Tyler Dean. And because I'm old, I thought I was seeing things. So I was doing attendance last night, and I was like, no, it's me. I keep seeing a B and a D. There's only one. I keep going. It took me like 3 times before I realized, no, there's actually 2 people. Did you know that, Tyler? Did you notice the other Tyler, or maybe you haven't seen him? I was like, Tyler Bean or Tyler Dean? Like, why can I not get these B's and D's right? Oh my God, it was hilarious. That's what happens when you get old. But anyway, you guys messed me up, so I have to be very, very careful when I take attendance. So we're going to continue with chapter 10, and we are going to focus in this time on the questions themselves. So we talked yesterday about just the interview process, HR giving you a call, setting up a screening interview to go over your resume to ensure what they've seen on your resume is what is in alignment with the job description. So then what happens? So you finally get to the interview. I know this goes without saying, my friends, but please show up early. And I'm going to say it, even though I know you all will say, I know that. Let me tell you, you never know what can happen. Well, things outside of traffic, sometimes you can just get lost, right? Sometimes you don't know where you're going. True story. I worked at another college, and we were interviewing for a professor, right? Professor. And this professor got lost. He showed up late. And this is Florida, and it was very hot outside. And he had a very generous amount of hair. And so he was sweating profusely. He could not stop sweating. We gave him towels, we gave him water, and the guy continued to sweat. Now, I was able to look past the sweat. Why? Because I needed that English professor to start working. Not everyone was, and it was a panel interview. So you know what they talked about the total time. You mean the guy that was sweating all the time? I'm like, no, his name is Professor so-and-so. But the only thing they can remember is the sweat. Why? Because the guy got lost, he got turned around. Don't be that guy, right? We'll talk next week about first impressions. First impression is a lasting impression. Can we not agree? You do not want to, start off your interview making a bad impression because you're late and you're lost and all those different types of things. So be on time. You never know what can happen. Maybe you have to go through security. Maybe they have you in another building. Like, you just never know, right? Make sure you understand their protocol. If you have to get a badge, if there's a parking pass, whatever it is, this is something else that I ask HR that person that is doing the screening interview, make sure who am I going to be meeting with, first and last name. Do I need to arrive early to go through security? Ask those questions. Sometimes they forget to tell you, right? Sometimes that HR person may not even be on the campus where you're interviewing. So do not leave it in their hands to tell you. You need to remember to ask these questions. Now, if you happen to have to do a virtual interview, typically for most of you, it will probably be your second interview, if at all. But you never know because people travel, which is what causes the virtual interview anyway in your fields. But, make sure, let me get these people in, make sure that, you have the systems on your computer. Make sure you have your resume available on your computer in case they want you to share it. Make sure that you know how to use the platform. If they say, oh, we're going to have you do a quick virtual with Thomas because he's he's down south right now. Make sure you know which platform. What are we talking? Are we talking, Big Blue Button? Are we talking Microsoft? Are we talking Zoom? What type of platform are we using? Google? Ask those questions because you again, don't allow them to assume and it can be downloaded onto your devices. Now, again, most of the telephone interviews will be probably through a screening interview, not always. Do not get confused on your midterm because I know I always say that a screening interview will be done via telephone, but I know there is a question on your midterm that asks about telephone interviews or screening interviews. They are not synonymous with each other. So don't let that question confuse you. When they're asking about a screening interview on the midterm, they're asking for its purpose. When they talk about a telephone or a virtual interview, those are just different ways you can have interviews. And like I said, most times, I'm using the example of a screening interview being the type of interview that is typically done via virtual or telephone, right? So that's the only relevance of the virtual and the telephone and the screening. I'm just saying that that's how a screening interview is typically done, but that's the only relationship between the two, right? Anyway, with a telephone interview, just make sure that your voicemail is not full. Make sure that your phone is not on silent. Make sure you're in a quiet place. Make sure that you're available a few minutes early because you never know. If they call a little early, their phone, their timer could be different from yours. Like you don't want to miss it. Again, I've already talked about this, making sure that you have the right video platforms onto your devices, your cameras working, all this good stuff. Now, let's get into the heart of today's information. I told you yesterday that there will be questions. We all know that there are questions on interviews, right? Because we all take interviews, so we all know that there are questions. We know that there are different types of questions. We may not know that questions typically fall within these three categories. The first category is general information. The second category is behavioral questions. And then the third category are stress-related questions. Now, here's the deal. Most general questions are aimed at gathering information about you, right? Your experience, maybe what's on your resume. You may hear a question, something like, tell me about yourself, talk about the jobs you've had, what's interested in you in this company. Why do you want to work for this company? What are your strengths? These are all general questions, just trying to get a feel for you. But most times, the first question that they ask is, tell me about yourself or what made you interested in this company. Now, let me demystify that question. That is not what they really want to know. They don't really want to know about you, and they really don't want to know why this company Specifically, but indirectly, they do. How do you answer that question? How you answer that question, think of it like your career plan. Remember your long-term goal and all the steps you take takes you to that long-term goal? Well, in this scenario, it's kind of like dating. Everything you've done to date has led you to them. So you have to weave your story and end with, and now I'm here at this company. Because remember, you are supposed to be applying for this company because it is in alignment with your career goals. These are career jobs. These are not, I just need a job to feed my family. So career jobs expect you to tell them that they are a part of your career plan, that you are coming to work for them because it is strategic. It's not you just want money. Why do they want to hear that? Because they want to know that you're going to stay. They want to know that you are invested in that company. They want to know that you're not just there for a paycheck, whether it's true or not. So here's how you answer that question. You tell a story really, really quickly, and it ends with them. If you don't have a lot of experience, you run through your resume. I'm going to show you, don't worry. And if you have experience, you touch a little bit on that experience, but it all leads to them. So here's an example. Let's say I am a veterinary assistant and I am applying to work at a pet clinic. Now, I want to work at a pet clinic because one day I want to own my own mobile clinic. So I want to work at this clinic because I want to see how clinics work. Here's how I would tell the story. I don't have a lot of VA experience. This is my first time, but obviously I love animals. So here's how I would start. I would say, I've always had a love for animals. Tell me a little bit about yourself, Ms. Taylor. I've always had a love for animals. Every summer I would go to my grandparents, home. They had a small farm, and I would work with their animals. I found that I really liked working with the larger animals, the cows, the horses, whatever. And I knew one day that I would go work, with animals. After I graduated, I took a couple of jobs, maybe worked at Target, maybe worked in a legal office, nothing to do with animals. I took a couple of jobs working in customer service because I really liked it. I worked at Target. I worked at, the legal office. I'm running straight through that. It has nothing to do with the animals. But I knew that I still had a passion for animals. So I decided to go back to school. Upon graduating, I knew I wanted to work at a clinic that helped large animals. They're a clinic that helps large animals. You see what I'm doing? And so after doing my research, I felt like your company would be the best place for me to come. That's what they want to know. Why are you here? Did you see what I did? If I have experience, I'm going to stop a little bit along the way. The first job I took, I worked at a pet shelter, and I like the pets, I really lean in on the big pets because that's what they deal with. I found that I really gravitated towards the larger pets. You're telling the story is what you're really doing when you're walking through your resume. Do you guys understand that? They want to feel like you are at their company for a reason, not just because you need a job. So that's what they really want to know when they say, tell me about yourself. They don't want to know, oh, I grew up in Florida. No, they want to hear, walk them through your resume. You be quick, don't be more than 2-3 minutes, and then you get there. And so once you get that, they'll be like, oh, okay. So you'll see the light bulb starts to come on. They'll be like, okay, I have a better sense of what this person is about, right? Even if they ask you for the jobs that you've held, you can still kind of tell that kind of story and get to them. That's all they want to know with a general information question. Why are you here? Tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me, walk me through your resume, walk them through it just like that. Always end up at their job. Any questions on that? Are you going to have to switch that story for every company that you go to? Yeah. Now, hopefully, if you're doing it right and you really do want to work for large animals, it's going to be the same story. But if you end up going to a pet hospital, you got to find something that makes sense, because you really shouldn't be applying for jobs that don't make sense with your career plan in the first place. So the story should be genuine, because you are genuinely looking for jobs that make sense for your career plan. Now, the other type of questions that you will be asked, these are the big ones, because this is all about past behavior. This too is going to focus in on the things that you've done, in your past. So these are what we call behavioral type questions. They have to do with your previous experience. You'll always know it's a behavioral type question, because it'll always start with, tell me about a time when, describe a time when, describe a situation where. It's always past tense. It's past tense because they want to get a sense of who you are. Now, let me tell you, all these questions are going to center around 3 different scenarios, no matter what. A situation with a customer, a situation with a coworker, or a situation with a manager. Always, always, always. Coworker, customer, or manager. Tell me about a time when, and if it's a customer, what is it going to be? Some difficult customer, how did you deal with it? If it's a coworker, some non-performing coworker, how did you deal with it? If it's a boss, it's going to be something to do with a time constraint or miscommunication. How did you deal with it? How do you answer these questions? First of all, understand all they really want to know is if you are a problem solver. That's all they want to know. A customer comes to you with a complaint. Can you solve a problem? A coworker is not performing. How do you solve that problem? Your boss is giving you too much miscommunication. How do you solve that problem? Are you a problem solver? Here's how you answer it. You want to have in your back pocket, and this is why I always tell people to bring a notepad, so you can have little code cheat sheets on your notepad. They won't know what those codes are, but you will. You know they're going to ask you a past tense behavioral question, and you know it's going to be one of those 3 scenarios. So you want to have in your back pocket a time when you had to deal with a customer and they were complaining, a time when you probably had to deal with some type of non-performing coworker, or a time you had to deal with a boss you needed clarification on. If it is a customer, think about a time when a customer has some type of issue. They want to know, do you know how to focus on the problem and not the customer? I don't care if the customer is irate. I don't care if the customer is belligerent. I don't care if the customer is confused. Most times customers are just confused. They thought they had a discount. They didn't have a discount. They thought you were supposed to come on Tuesday. You came on Wednesday, whatever their situation is. How did you deal with the issue, regardless of the how the customer was behaving? They want to know that you are the type of person that can say, okay, let's focus on the problem and be solution oriented. So you could say, well, you know what? I did have this one time where I was working in Starbucks and there was this customer that maybe had an allergy, but they forgot to tell us and blah, blah, blah. And so they were saying they did tell us, they didn't tell us. You know what we did? We focused on the issue. We're not upset about who said what. The person has an allergy. That's the biggest issue. We apologized profusely. We remade it and we gave her a coupon. What does that show? That small little act. That shows you know how to deal issues. You know, you're not going to go down the rabbit hole of, no, I didn't. Yes, you did. No, I did. Yes, you did. It's your fault. It's my fault. I didn't do anything wrong. Nobody wants to hear that. Can you focus in on the issue, solve the issue? That's what they want to hear. So in your notepad, you're going to think, dang, did I ever have an issue when I had to deal with a customer? And maybe you did. Maybe you had that Sally example. So you're just going to have on your notepad, customer Sally. They don't know what that is if they happen to look over on your notepad, but you know what that is because you don't know if they're going to ask you a customer question, a coworker question, or a manager question. So you want to have it in your back pocket. And, you know, one of the reasons why we get so nervous is because we don't know what they're going to ask. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, they're going to ask one of these 3 things, right? And they're not going to talk about their job just yet because this is past tense. You've never worked in their environment before. So these questions are going to be very general. It's going to be like, just tell me about a time when you had to deal with a difficult or whatever, right? So if it's a customer, it's always going to be a difficult customer. How'd you deal with it? If it's a coworker, 9 times out of 10, not always, it's going to be a non-performing coworker. Maybe they can't show up on time. Maybe they are having an issue doing their part. What do they want to know? They want to know, can you lend yourself to your coworker and not go rat them out? Yes, they actually want to know that. Not because they don't want you to rat people out, but because they want to know, again, are you a problem solver? There was this time you were working with Larry, and Larry just could not get the step. Yeah, y'all had to go through a 3-step process to do whatever. He couldn't get step 2. So you went to Larry one day and you asked him if he would like you to show him. And you showed Larry, and Larry was able to get it done, and things worked out great. I remember when I was in the military, I was in the Army. I'll never forget, we were in South Korea. And when you were in, the military, in order to get promoted, you have to go through these vigorous trainings. And I was trying to become a sergeant, and we had to go through, we call it PLDS or something like that. You know, you have to go through all this training. And one of the trainings was to do what we call land navigation, which you have to go through a 5-mile radius in the daytime and at nighttime with a compass, a protractor, some grid coordinates, and a pencil. And you have to find 4 coordinates by yourself in the daytime and at night. Let me paint the picture. And it was in the dead of winter. For the life of me, I couldn't get through land navigation. So I was mortified. I was terrified. I'm like, oh my God, I'm a fail. I'm never going to make sergeant. And I'll never forget this guy, sat me down, and he explained land navigation to me. I got it, got all 4 points. Now, I'm not going to tell you what I did because of my personality. I learned this phrase called dead reckoning. I'm the type of person, if I see a target, I go straight for it, even if there's another path. So the first target, I just found my compass, found my back azimuth, and I went straight for that point. Man, I was bloody because I was pulling on trees, jumping over rivers, and I mean, going through like these little waters, not a river, but jumping over like water and just climbing my way up. And I finally got to the point, and then I see people following this trail, just laughing and whatnot. And I'm like, what the heck? They was like, Taylor, you can take the trail. But man, I was trying to get to that point. And I got to that point. Of course, I took the trail after that because I almost killed myself. But I learned that about my personality because I definitely am a dead reckoner. I find something, I find my target, and I go straight for it. But what is the point? If it was not for that guy, I would have failed. If that guy had not helped me, I would have failed, right? He didn't get any award for helping me. Of course, I did, express my thanks and told my sergeant. But that is the point. People want to know, can you help your fellow person and still get the job done? That's the point, because our platoon as a group, you get all these different points for everybody that, does well. So that's what they want to know. Do you know how to help your fellow person and get the job done? So think of a time when you've had to help a fellow coworker. It could be you had to pick them up because their car broke down. It could be anything, and you got it done, right? So maybe you had to help Larry. Have a little notation to yourself in case they ask, have you ever had to deal with a time a coworker wasn't performing, blah, blah, blah. If it is a manager, it is always going to be the managers either giving you too much to do or not communicating well. They want to know, do you know how to manage up? Do you know how to go to your boss and ask for clarifying information? Your boss gives you 2 different assignments. Hey, Mr. Smith, I noticed last week you asked me to get project A done, but then, on Monday you gave me project B and it seemed really, really urgent. I just wanted to clarify. Did you want me to finish out A first, or did you want me to pivot and do B? Or watch this, up the ante, come up with a solution. What I can do, I can finish up A by this Friday, and then instead of jumping on B on Monday, I can start it on Wednesday, and I can still be finished by Friday. Would that be good for you? That's all they want to know. Do you know how to deal with the problem? Are you the type of person that's going to go to your boss and be like, I don't know which one you want me to do. You gave me 2 of them. Nobody wants that, right? They want you to be a problem solver. So I want you to think of a time where maybe, and again, you don't know exactly how they're going to frame the scenario, but think of a time when you had to deal with a boss and you had to manage up. You had to go to that boss, get clarifying questions, clear up any communication, and still get the job done. And even more, you offered a solution because you're a problem solver. Does that make sense, guys? Any questions on that? All right. Now, when it comes to stress related questions, these are the hypothetical questions that are based on typically things within their company, right? There's also in the book, it calls blue sky questions, where the interviewer describes a scenario that may or may not be related to the job, but typically those are going to be in your behavior. And most stress related questions, it is going to be specific to them. This is where I'm going to tell you right now, they're going to throw in that curveball, probably going to have to do with some guy or girl that you're replacing. Sometimes they're going to want to know, can you do what they can't do? Sometimes they throw that in there. But most times it's going to be something to do with your position, and they want to know that you can get the job done. So a lot of those stress related questions, watch this, are very specific, are very similar to the behavior because they're still going to include a customer or a project if you're not specifically dealing with a customer, a coworker, or a manager. So the only thing you need to do is really know, this is why you need to do your research, because you really need to understand that position. And you have to say, and you can even Google this. What type of issues, what type of situations, what type of stress related questions can be asked if I'm in the VA, if I'm in the welding, if I'm in the electrical, if I'm in the HVAC, right? Well, you already know if it's residential customer facing, it's probably gonna have to do with some customer, right? If it's more project-based commercial, then it probably has to do, if you're dealing with a project, the customer made a change to the project, right? Now it's gonna affect your deadline. So it's still customer, but indirectly. So just think through, okay, this is what type of work do they do? What type of issues could arise? And then try to come up with some similar scenarios, not exact, because obviously you haven't done the work yet. If you have done the work, then you can speak directly to a similar scenario. But if you haven't done the work, try to find a parallel example where you would address that issue, or you can say hypothetically, if I were in that issues, here's what I would do, and you can figure out what you would do either by just Googling it or thinking through, okay, I already know Ms. Taylor said being a problem solver, so let me figure out a way I would have addressed that to where they know that I'm trying to solve the issue. And you want to have that, again, just have it, in your back pocket, so if you want to put a little S for stress, like, again, don't have it so obvious on your notepad. And I even suggest having like a little small notepad, not like a big old 8.5 by 11, so they can read what you're writing. And you have it jotted down. Now, not everybody needs the little cheat sheet, but if you do, because some people are getting nervous, I know I get nervous, then you can have it written down. But with the stress related questions, still typical, same type scenarios I've just described. It's going to be more directly related to their work. Does that make sense? Any questions on that? All right. So there are questions that they will not ask if they have any good training. They will never ask illegal questions because hopefully their HR department knows better, right? They will never ask you illegal questions. Like, how old are you? Do you have a disability? What's your ethnicity? What's your gender? What's your marital status? What is your religion, right? Now, I do not care if you walk in there 7 months pregnant. They cannot ask, oh, when are you due? I know you'd be like, what? Maybe I'm not pregnant. Anybody ever made that mistake? Anybody ever had that mistake happen to them? I have. I'm traumatized by it. This lady at my church swore I was pregnant. I had to tell this, not now, not now. But like a few years after I had my daughter, the lady kept telling me I was pregnant. I'm like, ma'am, I'm not pregnant. I just like cheese and I'm bloated. Leave me alone. Give me a complex. You do not know someone's pregnant, right? You cannot ask those questions. I do not care if the person has Coke bottle glasses on and this is a welding job. They can't say, are you, do you need accommodations? You know, they cannot make those assumptions. I don't care if you walk in there with a cane. Maybe you had a car accident. Maybe you had a biking accident. It doesn't mean that you have a disability. They cannot ask those questions. I'm gonna tell you, I've seen people actually go to court for discrimination during an interview. All HR departments should have a legal person on their team. They should not ask you those questions because you know your answer could affect how they view you. And some people may say, well, you know, why can't they ask what they want to ask? Because you don't want any bias. You don't know that person. You don't know what they're going to do with the information. You don't know how they're going to skew it. You don't know how they're going to bring it back to their supervisor. So they are told to never, never ask. And hopefully they won't ask that question. And you don't have to deal with that issue. But just know those questions are illegal. You know, they can't ask you if you just married. Please do not disclose your business to people. You may think you're trying to build a rapport, but you don't know who they're bringing that information to. Maybe this person just got married. You just got married and they just happened to mention they just got married. Oh, I'm so glad you're able to accommodate seeing us on Tuesday because I'm leaving for, you know, I'm getting married away on Friday. Maybe you just got married last week. Oh, I just got married too. Do not tell people your business because you don't want she might go to her boss and her boss would be like, oh, you know, here I got two people just getting married and they're never going to want to come do you know, extra overtime. You don't know how people are going to take that information. Keep your business to yourself. Keep your business to yourself until you get the job. Do not disclose information. I don't care if you just had a baby and you see the person gushing over their baby. Oh, that's a nice baby. Keep it moving. Do not disclose your personal business. Right? I know you're trying to build a rapport. Tell the baby it's cute. Don't talk about your business and keep it pushing because you just do not know what's on the other side of that. That person can be a very friendly person, but remember, they're comparing you apples to apples and you don't want any bias. And we'll talk next week about bias. Bias does exist, unfortunately. And so you do not want to give people a reason to be biased towards you. All right. Now, are there questions that you can ask? Obviously, you definitely want to have your questions ready, but make sure that you are asking questions throughout the interview. Don't save all your questions to the end. Typically, in the general question information section, once you've told them about you, they're going to tell you a little bit about the company. You've done your research on the company. Maybe you had one or two questions on your pad about the company. Oh, yeah, one of the reasons why we're bringing you on is because we just got this new project in Tampa. That's when you interject to start a little bit of a conversation. Yes, I read about that on your website. You guys got a major contract. It's the first contract you've ever gotten in Tampa, right? Yeah, they're going to be so excited that you know about that. Absolutely. And it's one of the reasons we're trying to beef up this division is because we got this new project. Maybe you had a clarifying question. Here is how you interject your questions without being obvious, because I'm going to tell you right now, if you wait until the end of the interview to start asking a bunch of questions, you are going to give the impression that it could be an issue. You don't want to put that in the interviewer's head. So if you had a question about them, you know, with this new project in Tampa, now maybe you want to be in Tampa, but you read somewhere or you heard the person say something about, oh, but you got to train down in Fort Myers. You want a clarifying question, but you don't want to make it obvious. So, and you've written that down because maybe it was in the job description somewhere. When they start talking about the company, they're all excited about this project in Tampa. Like, yeah, that was the one. I thought I read that they're going to be training in Fort Myers. Oh, no, that was the other division, not yours. Okay, inside you're thinking, thank God, because I didn't want to go to Fort Myers. All right, mental note. Now that question is answered, but it's not answered in a way that will give the person any suspicion that it's an issue or not. You don't want them to know how you feel about this job because you want to go back home and you're not going to get offered the job until after they have discussed you, and you're not going to accept the job until after you've made a discussion with yourself or your significant other about how you feel about the job. Because remember, you're walking into this job thinking it's one thing. They're walking into this interview thinking you're one way. And it's not until after you finish the interview whether you really know what the job is about and they know what you're about. So when they send you that job offer, hopefully in the pay range is between 25 and 30, you'll know, wait a minute, this job definitely should be 27. This person's telling me I have to work on 2 projects instead of 1. You didn't know that from the job description. Conversely, the person is saying, wow, this person has a little bit more experience than what I was thinking. We may have to offer him 27. They offer you 27. You were hoping for 27. Boom. Now you got it. That's why you don't talk about money during an interview, because you don't really know what the job is. That's why you don't discuss money until afterwards. So again, what questions can you ask though? One question I always ask is, if it's a new position, then you don't have to worry about no one's had the position before. But it could be an issue where maybe they've had the contract for 3 months and they haven't filled the position. And so now you're going to start and they're going to be expecting you to work all this overtime to get caught up. So you may want to ask, oh, is this project started yet? I just wanted to know. Again, you're not giving any type of indication that it's an issue or not, but you want to ask, oh yeah, we started it 3 weeks ago. When we do get going, we're going to be a little bit behind. Okay, so now you already know, okay, so they probably don't want me to work some overtime because they're going to be a bit behind. Or you could say, oh, was this position filled previously? Yeah, Terry, he was good, but he left about 2 months ago. And so we're playing catch up. Oh God, that means I got to work for 2 extra months worth of what Terry didn't do. Or maybe the project hasn't started yet, so it's going to be a slow start. But by you asking those questions, then you will know what you're walking into. Nobody wants to walk into a situation and they don't know what the scenario is. But that's how you get a sense of what it is without letting on that it's an issue or not. You don't ever want to let on that you have a problem with something, right? All right. And what are the working hours is good because you'll kind of hear from what they're saying. Oh, we have an early start. Oh, maybe you want to know what that means. Maybe you got to drop your kids off. Oh, you guys normally start around what time? Oh, we normally start around 6, and we don't typically finish until 6. Oh, that's 12 hours. Okay, good to know, right? Now you write it down. You're not saying anything, but it's another question. Another question you can ask too is, where are they in the interview process? You need to know, am I the first candidate or am I the 15th candidate? If you're the first candidate, that means you could be waiting 2 months to hear from this job because they got to go through all 15 candidates. If you're the last candidate, you could hear next week. It is very common to ask, where are you in the hiring process and how soon are you looking to fill the position? That will let you know how aggressive you, especially if you really want the job, how aggressive you need to continue to be while you're waiting for an answer on this job. Some other questions that I tend to ask that you may not ask, and it really depends on where you are, is, what's expected of me in the first 30 days? I like to ask that. It's my way of knowing, okay, again, if I come here, I'm going to get to my desk and there's going to be like 15 reports that are due. I kind of want to know those types of things, but you don't ask about money because they need to go back and figure out where they feel that you are on that spectrum of experience. And then they have to then offer you a dollar amount, right? They can't do that right in the middle of that conversation. Does that make sense, guys? Any questions on that? All right. Give me 1 second. I need to plug up my. All right. So we talked about that. Salary, all that kind of stuff. We talked about that. All right. So obviously we know how to prepare for an interview, and this is why we have you do mock interviews. Hopefully by now you understand why it's important to do a mock interview, why we push for mock interviews. These things do not come natural. It's not natural for us to, organize our thoughts into behavioral and stress related questions, and to, think through how to ask, strategically about different things. And this is why we want you to do the mock interview, because we do want you to practice, right? Clearly, we know the night before, get enough rest, make sure you eat well. Now, listen, that may sound like, duh, make sure that you eat well. Let me tell you, I had a candidate years ago that was applying for a chief financial officer position. I was up in New York, and the candidate's stomach growled the whole time. Clearly, she was hungry. I don't know if she just drank coffee, did not eat. It was so loud. Ask me what I remember about the candidate. All I remember is her stomach growled. Is that not horrible? Do you want that to be you? You don't want to be the stomach growler. Make sure you eat, okay? Make sure you eat. Make sure you're not late. Make sure you're not sweating. None of those things, right? You don't want to be that person. All right. So here's your comment question for today. Here's what I want to know. I want you to name 3 things you are looking for in a company. 3 things that you are looking for in a company. Y'all saw that say don't list money, right? Okay. 3 things, 3 qualities. Hopefully you're catching on. What do they have to do with my career goals? What am I looking for? How does it relate to my career goals? All right, my friends. Do we have any questions? If not, thank you guys so much for joining me today. I will see you back here tomorrow. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.